This is probably the most important video I'll ever make. It's about something called Meniere's disease, and it's something that I've been dealing with since 2016. It started when I felt almost like I had a fever or like my ear was really hot one evening, and I woke up in the morning and it gave me really muffled hearing in my left ear. And I thought it was earwax. I thought maybe I sweat a lot at night or something, and just I was really hot that night, and maybe it melted earwax against my eardrum, and I couldn't hear. So I spent the next few weeks trying to do things to clear out my earwax. And after about a month, I couldn't really hear any better, and so I went to a doctor to see if maybe they could remove the earwax, and the doctor said, well, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is you don't have any earwax in your ear, so all the little home remedies that I'd done to remove my earwax had worked. But the doctor said, the bad news is that hearing loss that you're experiencing is a problem. So the doctor gave me some steroids, and I took those. They did help, actually, and then I went to schedule something with my ENT, which took weeks, and then saw the ENT, and the ENT told me, well, that hearing loss is permanent. So I wondered, well, what happened to me? And the doctor said, well, you've experienced Meniere's-like symptoms. So technically the doctor didn't diagnose me as having actual Meniere's disease, but I had a couple of the indicators of it, the hearing loss and the sense of pressure in my ear. So I guess according to some diagnostic guidelines, I have to have 3 symptoms, and then it's Meniere's, and I had 2. So I asked the doctor, can anything be done to restore my hearing? The doctor said no. And then I said, well, what can I do going forward? And the doctor basically said, you can try a low sodium diet, and that's it. There's nothing else that can be done. So that hearing is gone forever, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and maybe you try low sodium diet, and then if this thing hits you again, take those steroids. Now, the sad thing is, if I'd known about the steroids right away, if you can get those within the first couple days after you have the hearing loss, then the odds are that it can restore your hearing and everything will be fine. So I didn't. I have permanent hearing loss in my left ear. And then really I just sort of wrestled with that for the next 5 years or so. And then I would get an episode where my ear would start to feel full again, and I would contact my doctor, and the doctor would say, well, go ahead and take some more steroids. And then she prescribed like antihistamines and things like that to see if maybe nasal congestion was causing it, because your nose and your ears are all sort of hooked together. And I managed it for quite a long time. And then earlier this year, after I got my COVID shots, I had an episode where I felt a little bit dizzy. And so I thought, well, I don't know why I'm feeling dizzy, but I'm going to go to bed. And I went to bed, and it was the most violent nausea that I've really ever had. So I was basically nauseous. I couldn't stand up without holding on to something. And I was puking for about 5 hours. And I thought, well, I don't know what's causing this, but maybe I need to call an ambulance and have them take me to the hospital, because I don't know what's happening. Am I having a stroke? I don't know what it is. I wasn't thinking anything related to Meniere's at the time. So after I got to the hospital, they tested to make sure I wasn't having a stroke, and the doctor said, this is Meniere's. And I said, well, I mean, I've kind of had episodes that are like this in the past. And the doctor said that was probably Meniere's. And so then they scheduled me for a neurologist. I really didn't have any luck with the ENT. Went to the neurologist, and then as I was waiting for that appointment, because again, it just takes months, I was having attacks probably every other day. Sometimes the attack was every day. Sometimes if I was lucky, I might go 2 days without an attack, and then I'd have an attack on the 3rd day. But it wasn't just that I couldn't basically stand up or walk without holding on to something. It was that the day after, I felt almost like I was recovering from a hangover, like my brain was foggy and I couldn't really think very clearly. So I thought, this is really debilitating, and almost everything I read said that there was not a cure for this. So kept trying to read up and read up because, again, the neurologist, here we are in the U.S. with the best medical healthcare system in the world, and if you want to see a specialist, you're probably going to have to wait. So just kept trying to read up, and then finally sort of stumbled on a website where people were talking about JOH. I never heard of it before, but people were saying, well, I've been on JOH for 2 years, and it's controlled my Meniere's attacks. And other people would say, well, I've been on JOH for some other amount of time, it's controlled my Meniere's attacks. So I looked into it. JOH is a guy named John of Ohio, and he's come up with a series of vitamins that you take that control Meniere's. And so I actually don't even believe that vitamins work, and I certainly don't believe in alternative medicine or anything like that. But I thought, well, I mean, the vitamins that he was talking about seemed harmless. There wasn't really a downside to it. I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. They don't cost very much, and there's not real big health downside to taking them. So I ordered them online, and then they came in. And then I went back into the JOH article where he describes using all this to figure out what the dosages were for all this, again, make sure that I was taking the right amount of these things during the right amount of time. When I was reading through the paperwork, he mentioned using antivirals. He said that in other countries it's very common to treat Meniere's with antivirals, mostly ones that we use to treat herpes, so Acyclovir and Valcyclovir, or back when they were still on patent, Valtrex and I don't know, maybe something else. But the things that they used for like outbreaks of like the kind of herpes that you would have as a sexually transmitted disease. I didn't know. Maybe I had those. I didn't know. A lot of people have HSV1. That is what causes cold sores. And then HSV2 is the sexually transmitted one. Who knows? I may have picked it up at some point in time, but I figured, well, I'll try it. So I emailed my doctor and thought, maybe she'll prescribe it. She didn't really hesitate. She said there's not a lot of downside to them. Just make sure you're drinking a lot of water, and it's worth a try. And I had sent her some clinical studies that I'd found online where people were using antivirals to treat Meniere's disease. And so I got them, and now the chronology of this was that the first day I took the JOH vitamins, I had an attack, but that wasn't that unusual. This was back when I was having an attack every day or 2 or 3. And then as soon as I filled the script for the antivirals, I had a second attack on that day. Again, not that unusual. It may have been caused by taking these things, or it may have just been my time to have those attacks, because again, they were happening very frequently. 5 days after that attack when I first took the antivirals was when I had my second attack, and that was huge progress relative to back when I was having attacks every other day. So I thought, well, I mean, let's see how this goes, but this is really encouraging. So I had an attack the day I started the antivirals, an attack 5 days after, and it's been 2 or 3 months now, and I haven't had an attack since. So the antiviral treatment seems to work. Now, according to the literature that I'm reading on this, it doesn't work for everyone, but it may work for actually a majority of people who have Meniere's. So I think it's at least worth a try. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, and this is just random medical advice on the internet. So don't take it as medical advice. Talk this over with your physician. But it may make a difference for you. Now, I have seen 5 doctors for this. Not one of them would have prescribed an antiviral to treat this. Not one. I had to bring it to their attention, and then my primary care physician gave me the script. I'm currently working with an infectious disease specialist because this is related to an infectious disease and using medication to control it. That infectious disease specialist has put me through every test in the world. I actually don't have HSV1 or HSV2. It's not showing up in my blood. Now, it is possible that I have some sort of weird localized infection in my ear. I don't know. And really with Meniere's, you're going to hear a lot of people say they don't really know what causes it or what cures it. Just in this case, this actually works. So I hope it works for you. according to the literature, again, some people, your Meniere's just won't respond to it. Also, how long you've had bad attacks seems to have an impact. So if you've suffered with it for a long, long, long time, 10, 20 years, sort of the longer you suffer with it, the less likely these antivirals are to work. In my case, I had mild attacks. I mean, with permanent hearing loss, so I don't know how mild you can call that. But I had mild attacks for about 5 years, but once the severe attacks hit, the antivirals were able to really clear everything up. So what is Meniere's disease? For those of you who are wondering, it is a disease where you start getting pressure on your inner ear, and then that causes hearing loss. It causes you to not be able to balance. Like I said, when I was having attacks, they would come on, I would just start feeling dizzy, like, and then I couldn't stand up or walk without holding on to something. Even if I tried to lay down, if I moved my head even slightly, it was just like the worst case of seasickness. And it does cause you to go deaf over time. Now, I don't think that I'm experiencing any further hearing loss now that I'm on the antivirals, but this has affected a lot of people. Huey Lewis just went public with saying that he has Meniere's, he's going to go completely deaf. I hope that his doctors tried antivirals with him. Now, when I mentioned this to my doctors, almost all of them had the same reaction, which was something like, oh yeah, I've heard of people treating Meniere's with antivirals. Yet none of them would have prescribed it to me. So I think it's just unusual that you have doctors that know that this is a common treatment for it. None of them have said that this is an improper treatment for it, but it's like none of them came up with it without me bringing it up to them. And then once I did, they didn't have a problem with me trying it. So this is something you may have to talk to your doctor about. You may have to talk to a second doctor if your first doctor doesn't want to try this treatment. But with Meniere's, there really isn't any other treatment other than low sodium diet. And let me tell you what, low sodium diets are the worst. I feel bad for anybody who has to go on one. Or diuretics. People try and treat them with diuretics. So I don't know. I never went on diuretics, but the low sodium diet, it's impossible to buy food that has no sodium in it. You kind of have to cook all your stuff for yourself. And the stuff that's commercially available is terrible. But if you're like me, you're busy, you don't have time to shop for food, you don't have time to cook, certainly nothing you're going to get through a drive-through window is going to be low sodium. Now, on the upside, if I did follow a low sodium diet, I think that is healthier eating. I'd probably live longer. But you also have to live your life. And I found it just terribly inconvenient. So that's Meniere's. It's an awful disease. As people have said before, it's not going to kill you. It's just going to make you wish you were dead. And in my case, that is absolutely true. It's the worst thing that I'd ever gone through. So mostly better now. I can't tell if there are some lingering effects of it. Like my balance is not as good as it was before, I don't think. So there's probably even more irreversible damage that took place. But at least with the antivirals now, it looks like the worst of it may be over. I hope they keep working. When you talk to the doctors, I mean, in a lot of cases, they kind of know it works, but they're not sure why. So that's one of the things that makes Meniere's very hard to have, is that the doctors don't really know how to treat it. But if you have Meniere's and you haven't tried treating it with an antiviral yet, I would try it. Talk it over with your doctor. Again, I'm just a random person on the internet that you don't know. But talk it over with your doctor and see if that plan of treatment would work for you. So good luck, everybody.